Hello and a very warm welcome to Bharata First. You're watching Big Picture with Frank Rausen Pereira. Myanmar has been witnessing nationwide mass protests against the recent military coup. The ensuing crackdown by security forces has left over 200 protesters dead and more than 2,000 detained. The military crackdown in Myanmar has forced scores of refugees over the border into India. More than 300 Myanmar nationals, many of them police officers and their families, have reportedly entered Mizoram. Meanwhile, Mizoram Chief Minister Zoramthanga held a virtual meeting on Sunday with Foreign Minister of Myanmar Zinmar Ong amid the ongoing military crackdown, even as India has sealed all entry points along the border with the Southeast Asian neighbor and is closely monitoring to prevent any Myanmar nationals from entering the country. The tussle between the center and the state over the issue has created a tough time for New Delhi and security agencies in handling the situation on the ground. In this edition of Big Picture, we will analyze the Myanmar muddle and what it means for India. Joining me on the program today are Manjeev Puri, former ambassador, Shakti Sinha, Director, Delhi School of Public Policy and Governance, and Major General Ashwini Sivach, retired strategic analyst. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this edition of Big Picture. General, let me start the program with you first. How would you look at the situation in Myanmar? You know, the junta has taken over. There are protests all over the place. You know, what's the end game really as far as the military leadership in Myanmar is concerned?
Yeah, Frank, the situation is very fluid in Myanmar. I don't think the Myanmar military junta thought that the response of the public will be so stiff and the people will come in the streets. People are not worried that they will be killed. So it is gathering strength to strength. People are now violating the rules and regulation. They are not worried that they will be killed. So I suppose that situation today is quite tense and very fluid. Why it has happened is that the people now having realized the fruit of democracy from 2011 onward, they want that, they should not go back to the dark days of 1962 to 2011 when there was a military rule and where the people, freedom of speech, freedom of their, choosing their rights were all come. Having seen the fruits of democracy, they don't want to go back to those days. And hence the people are coming forward and ready to take a lot of risk. The irony is that they are all by themselves. I don't think too many countries have come in the direct support of Myanmar people. We as a human, or you can say a world community, has failed them. We have not gone all out to support them. As far as India is concerned, we are in a tight situation because the reason is obvious. You remember from 1962 to 2011, it was the military which was ruling there, and number of militant groups were operating from Yunnan province of Myanmar, especially the western portion of Myanmar, bordering Yunnan of China. Now, what was happening is that we were not able to resolve this issue. And since we were not having any diplomatic relationship with Myanmar, thinking that there is a military rule and we should have a democracy. But we soon realized in 1990, let's be practical, pragmatic, and whosoever rules in Myanmar, we must maintain good relations. In 1990, the Indian government opened its gate to Myanmar military ruler, and we realized that we stand to gain tremendously because all those militant groups which were operating in their western portion bordering India were not allowed that space, and they even allowed us to operate freely there. So it made a lot of tremendous difference. Our relationship grew again between the military rule and the democracy of India. After this, civilian government has come in 2011 onwards, and after 2015, Aung San Suu Kyi, which is a state councillor, her National Democratic Party has come. The relations have gone further higher. There is no doubt it. We had the best of the relation today. But what has happened is after this coup has taken place, India is in a very sticky wicket because the reason is that Myanmar is very important to us, for it is a gateway to Asian countries, look East policy and act East policy, neighborhood fast. And the reason is that if we criticize the military ruler, We stand to lose out because we can't be the one which is choosing who will rule the Myanmar. Today we have the best of the relation with Myanmar. All these Northeast militant groups are unable to operate. If we criticize them, we are afraid that we stand to lose out. We have got three projects which are going in Myanmar today. One is that India, Myanmar, Thailand trilateral highway. Then
Sure.
that Kaladan model transport model project which is going from Calcutta to Sitwe port and from Sitwe port to Aizawl through the road as well as waterways. So this is also important. So in case we criticize the military rule and try to back the democracy, we cannot be very sure whether Aung San Suu Kyi party or the democratic institution will come. In turn, we will spoil the relation with the military ruler and will stand to lose out. We have a very strong relationship between military to military because we have given them a submarine, number of weapon system has been given. Our, Chief of Army Staff has also visited Foreign Secretary. So having said so, my only point is we are on a sticky wicket. We do not know which side to go. We have to maintain a very stable diplomatic balance between either of them.
Okay. Ambassador, I'll come to you in just a bit and take this particular point up, as far as how we have to do the diplomatic tightrope walk as far as Myanmar is concerned. But before that, Mr. Sinha, a couple of aspects that I want to take forward with you. One is, of course, our links between Northeast India and Myanmar. How is that going to play out? Because, there is one chief minister from the Northeast who's come out openly in support of the democratically elected government there and wants to give them refuge in India as well. Now, that is one. And also another aspect is the system itself right from the beginning in Myanmar was skewed in favor of the military. And, that's how they took it forward. So this was bound to happen at some point in time.
Let me start, Frank, with your second question, actually. But people didn't realize it. Yes, the army has 25% of the seats. Yes, the army controls the ministries of defense, border affairs, and home affairs. Now, people think home affairs means the police. No, in Myanmar, following the old system of British India and controlled independent India, home affairs actually controls the district administration, general administration. So district officers, you call them deputy commissioners, collectors, district magistrate, let's use generally for district officers. At the district level, they control all government departments. So in industry, education, health, etc. Their units in the district on a day-to-day basis report to the district officer, and they have a dotted line relationship with the headquarters of the state capital or the national capital. So the army, by doing this, ensured that even though the policy making passed on other subjects other than reserved subjects to the elected government, in actual fact, the government machinery remained under control of the military. That completely handicapped the space available to the democratic elected government, which she tried to push through. She talked about the amendment again and again. The army expected the USDP to do better in the elections, did not. And therefore, I think the break had to come. It was too good to last too long, and this was bound to happen. This is something which I don't see enough appreciation. Your first point is again very important. Zoramthanga, the chief minister of Mizoram, talked to who? Talked to the acting foreign minister appointed by the NLD, Sin Maung. He talked to her and talked to the Zoe people living in USA and Europe and other places and talked about this. Now, Mizoram faces a real challenge more than the other states because we have this long agreement between Burma and Myanmar and India that the people can cross across to each other's countries without a visa. They can stay up to a certain number of days, I think 2 weeks, and they have to stay within a 10-mile, 16-kilometer of the border. Now, once you cross over, you really can't. I met an NLD activist from the neighboring state, Chin state, and he told me that he had lived in Aizawl for 3 years, not for 2 weeks, because in those days, 88, 90, that was the only place they felt safe in. And the fact that 500 people plus have crossed over, so while the Assam Rifles can man the border gates, the countryside is open, people are crossing over, and this will complicate relationship. On one hand, we have a tradition of looking after people. On the other hand, as the Home Minister said, we have not signed the Refugee Convention of the UN. You're not legally bound to that. And as General pointed out, your need of having good relations with the Burmese army, that Padaw, is so important for you that you have to find the right balance. And that is not going to come easy. We'll continue to be in awkward situation in Nagaland and Manipur is slightly different. Arunachal is very small, but Mizoram actually will be the test case. How do we manage bilateral relationship with the country, which is going through so much of turmoil at this stage?
Absolutely. Ambassador, this is where I bring you in now. And, as far as diplomats are concerned and Indian diplomacy is concerned, we've done fantastically well over the years. But it's a difficult tightrope walk for us in Myanmar to handle the situation there, isn't it?
Frank, thank you very much. And first of all, let me congratulate you and Bharata first. Good to see you in a new avatar. I think General Saab and Shakti have outlined the entire structure very well. You mentioned this thing about the sticky wicket and a fine line and so on. Look, diplomacy, when it comes to neighbors, especially neighbors with whom you share land borders, is always a tricky subject. It's always a slippery slope and one in which fine balances have to be struck, especially in a situation that the subcontinent and India finds itself, that you have people on both sides of the international border or the divide who have ethnically linked to each other, and where we have agreements of the kind that Mr. Sinha referred to, that you can go across for 2 weeks and stay for within 10 miles, etc. When these kind of people's links, and remember, India has thrived by talking about people's links, by emphasizing the people's links. In a very interesting sense, doesn't it speak about India being the big country in the subcontinent? Now, General Saab mentioned something very interesting about the history of Myanmar or Burma as it was in 1948. Many things happened, but one very interesting thing that happened, something like about 20, 25, 30 years back, Myanmar joined ASEAN. And this was a kind of seminal break from the situation. Now, earlier we used to think that it's part of the subcontinent taken away by the Brits and separated. Then came the issue of the Chinese dominance, especially as a result of the military takeovers in Myanmar all the way from 1962 onward. But joining ASEAN has, in a sense, put Myanmar in its geography a little different from where we are situated, even though we have this common border and we have people crossing over, etc. Now, we have sought to work relations with Myanmar in difficult situations. Remember, we developed fairly good working relations with the military junta as used to be there before 2015. Then there were elections and Aung San Suu Kyi, who has this old relationship with India, having even grown up in our country, and all of us having a kind of sympathetic vibe as far as she is concerned, a feeling of the heart that, we are with Aung San Suu Kyi, and we certainly are with her in her person and what she stands for. She was a bit cool towards us. And obviously so, because the very people that she was contesting with at the time of the elections in 2015 were people with whom we had a working relationship. That she realized that there are issues involved, that statecraft really means a number of things, meant that she did keep up a certain relationship, but we had challenges even during her leadership. We felt that she often agreed with the Chinese perspectives. We felt that she often agreed with the Western perspective. She paid a kind of lip service to us. Many factors are true. But in the end, remember, India is the world's largest democracy. In a sense, despite foreign policy and its imperatives, our heart beats for democracy. And when you see people, as General Saab put it very well, it's quite possible in the year 2021, the Myanmarese army, which thought, well, we've been at it since 1948, did not realize that within a few years, social media, the fact of this ASEAN business had changed things, that people were willing to do several things. So you are right, it is going to be very challenging for us. But then diplomacy is about challenging. I want to make one last point to you. It is extremely easy to be thousands of miles away from a country and pontificate about their internal situation, give them advice, talk about various things, even pay lip service or even give some kind of, help, clandestine or any other way. When you are a bordering country, you face the reality and you see what is happening. I think it becomes particularly a challenging task. And I like what the Indian government spokesperson, the foreign secretary, was recently in a talk show, and he mentioned We remain quintessentially with the people of of Myanmar. That is the important element as far as we are concerned. We understand who is in governance and we have to have a practical deal with them. But India remains the country which always showcases democracy. That's also a fact. And people draw inspiration from India's democracy. That is not something that the people on the streets in Myanmar are not aware of. The army is also aware of. So this is going to be a fine line, but it's a fine line that we've tread before. And I see no reason why we won't be able to manage it well as we have done in the past before.
Absolutely, absolutely. I don't see how we can't overcome this challenge as well, and no challenge is too big for Indian diplomacy, is what the ambassador is suggesting. And history has repeatedly told us that our diplomacy has always come through and has worked. All right, taking the discussion forward now, let's go back a little bit, General, and talk about the issue of what led to the military junta actually going ahead with the coup itself. What led, what prompted them to go ahead with this decision, and how much of a role do you see Beijing having in all of this?
Absolutely correct, Frank. Again, a very not a very straightforward answer. No one could really figure out. The point was that Aung San Suu Kyi, after she has come in power in 2015, started becoming much closer to the Chinese, much more than what the military rulers were. She have allowed China, Myanmar economic corridor to become ground reality. She allowed that the railway project should also continue. So sometime you think it that as far as she is concerned, she was playing to the tune of Chinese. That why the China will go against it. But this is a very puzzling question. No one has able to give a very straightforward answer. Because the point which today is there is no doubt, as far as the coup is concerned, there is a reason. Because the military rulers were feeling threatened because the National Democratic Party, which Aung San Suu Kyi is a councillor, they won landslide victory, 83% of the votes. Only 7% vote were won by a party which was pro-military. No, they were worried that once she comes with such a thumping majority, she may curtail certain, the freedom of action which is given to the military rulers, because they have a 25% reserve seat, they are holding defense, home and all. She may curtail their certain power, and they were worried about that, and that's why possibly they have done it. But whether the China has direct hand or not, it is still not able to made out. Though people feel it, the China has not criticized openly. China has also did not let it mention in UN Security Council when US and other countries were trying, because it says that it's an internal matter of Myanmar. So the point is, as on today, China is playing a very safe game, because for China, Myanmar is very important. Remember that if they have to go to Indian Ocean, there are two arms. On to the east is that from Yunnan to Kua Kapu, this China-Myanmar economic corridor, railway line, oil line, because the gas and oil will go from here to Yunnan province. And to the west is from Xinjiang to Gwadar, the one which is China Pakistan economic corridor. So both these arms which are on the east and west of India are important. So Myanmar is very important for China. So China will like this, because that's why they have also been supporting the Arakan militant group to give that protection to China Myanmar economic corridor, and to operate against the Indian interest. The Indian interest means from Sitwe, the road as well as the airways was going, this Kaladan model project, they were threatening, they were not letting our contractor work. So as far as China is concerned, China was good with military ruler, and Aung San Suu Kyi was also become very close to China in last about 2-3 years. And also she surprised the whole world that when she has not criticized the military ruler for Rohingya genocide, and she has taken a stand that as far as the military is concerned, there were no human rights violation carried out on Rohingyas, where about 8 lakhs of Rohingyas have migrated from Rakhine province to Chittagong Hills in Bangladesh. So having said so, it is a very complex situation, but once it has happened, So China will make use of this situation also, because China has been always close to the military ruler. They will make sure their interests are taken care of. They will make sure the China-Myanmar economic corridor is on the track. They will make sure this railway line as well as gas pipeline coming from Yunnan to Kua Kapu, that is a deep port, continue. They will try to formulate this. They will not openly support Aung San Suu Kyi, but they won't let other democratic countries to interfere in Myanmar. That is the stand which they have taken. Our stand is slightly sensitive, because we do not know which side to go. Very correctly brought out earlier that today we have the closest relationship between Myanmar and also Mizoram, especially Mizoram, and basically Mizoram and Manipur. People can cross over. We are not signatory to the UN Refugee Convention. We don't know what to do. Are we prepared to give them back? It may not be correct on the humanity that we give back those refugees which have come. And at the same time, there's heavy pressure on the military that these policemen which have basically crossed over, they must be handed over to the military rule. So it is not an easy solution. And having served in Mizoram in 77 to 79 and on a triangle which was bordering Chittagong and also Myanmar, I am aware of this point that 15-20 kilometer one can go on the either side, and it's very common. It is very difficult to make out where the border stands. So this is a big problem. This is a real problem, and one has to resolve it tactfully, diplomatically. For us, Aung San Suu Kyi is also important. So are the people of Myanmar. But we cannot outrightly go against the wishes of the military ruler, because they are calling the shot in Myanmar today.
All right, Mr. Sinha, let's talk about another aspect as well. And since Aung San Suu Kyi has been raised so many times now in the discussion, let's talk about her, and let's talk about her future and what all of this means really for her political future and her political party as well.
Very good question, Frank. I'll just slightly correct. I would have slightly different perception of Aung San Suu Kyi's relation with India, what Manjeev said, which is the fact that initially for the first time in Indian history, independent India, we supported democracy movement in other countries strongly in '88. After 1990, we started changing. And then we changed to the extent that we basically shut down NLD operating in India. Later on, when the military opened up to Aung San Suu Kyi herself, and she started meeting people, Zardari goes to Yangon, gives her a Sitare Pakistan medal. Secretary of State Clinton goes, she meets Aung San Suu Kyi at her house. Prime Minister Manmohan Singh goes, and there's a discussion whether he should meet her at all. If he meets her, where will he meet her? No, I'm Prime Minister, Indian Ministry said. She has to come to the hotel to meet her. Everybody else till then met Aung San Suu Kyi at her house next to India Lake in Yangon. So we did create misunderstandings with her, to be fair to her. Now, looking forward, she remains the most popular leader. This movement has now shown, they have lost about 250 people in police firings, military firings, through detention and torture. Dead bodies being returned with torture marks. Tremendous amount of pressure, and yet people are coming out in their thousands from Dawei in the south to Mandalay in the north. That is a huge spread of territory. People are coming out in this very, very big way. Earlier, the younger monks had come out in support of democracy. This time, even a very respected Buddhist figure, Sayadaw Sitago, he has come out in support of it. So this pressure is mounting on the military, and people are still rallying around Aung San Suu Kyi. The international community doesn't like her because of the Rohingya problem. So they are a little mixed about it. But I think the people are drawing inspiration. I was hearing this very good, I met before, a lady called Thinzar Shulei, a young leader. She doesn't like Suu Kyi because she says Suu Kyi didn't stand up to Rohingya. But even she says, look at the number of people on the roads. And we have drawn inspiration from Hong Kong, from Bangkok, and from India, that we are there out on the road. So I think military would have to come down. Senior generals may not like it, but there are indications that down the line, they may be uneasy. The fact that the police are openly coming out, so many policemen have refused to fire, some military men have refused to fire. I think we are looking for changes, provided that the West does not spoil the situation by attacking the military too strongly in public instead of putting private pressure. I think the Indian stand and the Japanese stand will probably lead to a better kind of a way forward for democracy and NLD to come back and take its place.
Since we are here, Ambassador, are you surprised at all in the way the international community reacted to this entire situation? How do we expect the international community to handle or tackle the situation going forward as well?
Frankly speaking, if I may say that, how much has the international community in the past done? Yes, there was a special representative of the United Nations. Our own ambassador Vijay Nambiar held that post for a long time. So, a kind of institutional pressure was there. But basically speaking, in a sense, Myanmar had been left to ASEAN on one side, and through the ASEAN route, a little bit of the Western free market kind of action, and basically the Chinese. Our role, we had ourselves limited it to a certain security kind of perceptions. The rest of it, we accepted the facts of what was happening and so on and so forth. Now, as regards Aung San Suu Kyi, let us remember, in a sense which is so open and clear, she is a symbol, and she is by far the largest symbol. Now, as Mr. Sinha was very rightly saying, some kind of accommodation, would there be a way forward? Look, how did the democratic setup, if we can call it that, come about in Myanmar in 2015? Why did the army relent? They relented because they saw the world, they saw the situation in Myanmar, and they said, look, we have to come to some kind of via media. And they came up with a via media which you can only say would come from their kind of a mindset. They kept control of the entire power structure. They also nominated any number of army officers to be permanent ex officio members of the parliament and so on, something that you don't see anywhere else in the world. But they did it. Now also some kind of a relation like that could be done. Who could achieve it? If you don't mind my saying so, I would take a bit of a contrary view. It's the Chinese. And the reason I say so, they are the only guys with real clout and power. Remember, they are the ones who can, if you say, save it from international opprobrium in the sense of legalistic standard thing. For the Americans and others, yes, this China contestation is an issue, Quad, India. So there is a certain change in the scenario between 2015 and today, and how that plays out in Myanmar, I don't know. But frankly, the people who have the ability to be able to do things, and remember, they also had fairly good, they had excellent relations with Aung San Suu Kyi, who recognized two things. She recognized, A, she should not look any less nationalist than the army. After all, her father was the one who started it all. Why should she look any less nationalist? And so she defended Myanmar so strongly, International Court of Justice going there and making statements. Nobody would have thought that a right thing for a state councillor, who in a sense was even above the president, to have gone and done this. And she also felt that no matter the fact that her better half had been British, no matter her relationships with India and other parts of the world, the Chinese were the real players. So why not get along with them? Was this a tactical move? Was this a strategic move? I don't know the answers. But it was good politics on her perspective. Right now, what seems to have happened in February is really the elections in November 20. The army found that, not only was she some kind of a leader figure, but she had now won such an overwhelming majority that despite having all your fellows sitting in every bench of the parliament, the fact was the people were coming together. Social media was galvanizing people. The world was galvanizing. And remember, as Myanmar does well as part of the ASEAN and otherwise, as its economy grows, the idea of people simply accepting authoritarianism is not a very easy one. It doesn't sit particularly easy with people. And these chaps, right? Did they make a mistake? I would say that they didn't handle matters particularly well. Will they find a via media? They might. They might if they see the situation go out of hand, or they might just hold it out for another couple of years, because unlike many other armies, the one in Myanmar is quite accustomed to being beaten, hit on all sides, and yet not relenting, just sticking on and on out there. So we have to see how things unfold. But I do think that the Chinese will be important players in whatever political settlement that might just be brought about, if at all something is brought about in Myanmar.
All right, time to get quick closing comments now from all my panelists with what all of this means for India and the best way forward. Starting first with you, General.
See, Myanmar, I certainly feel what Ambassador was telling, that China hold the key to the problem. There is no doubt China has a capacity and capability to influence Myanmar, because the biggest trade partner of Myanmar is China. Whatever sanction has been imposed by UK, US and other countries, now European Union has also imposed sanction today, are not going to make any impact on Myanmar. It will further make Myanmar go closer to China. So therefore, there is no denying the fact, as on today, China will be the one which will dictate what will be the future of Myanmar in future. Now, one thing stands out very critically, like what we were pointing out, even Mr. Shakti Sinha was saying, that, last time when the military ruler was slightly surprised, and they have to now start with a democratic sort of a system, was when the Buddhist monk came on the streets. They were surprised because these chaps were like what happened in Pakistan when the advocates came on the street. But here, the Buddhist monk, they wanted the democracy to come, and then military ruler realized that enough is enough. They brought the democracy back. Now the people of Myanmar are coming in a big way. They are not worried they will be killed. I think the writing on the wall is there. Myanmar military ruler will realize this. They may not able to hold it for too long. They will make compromise something, have an election in a year or two, and try to bring some sort of a democracy back. Because I don't think they will able to hold on. They never thought the people will give us such a stiff response this time. So that is where it is. Second thing is, they have a problem of Rohingyas in their hand. They know it. They will be further isolated. The civilian government, whosoever is there in Myanmar, is in a better handle this problem of Rohingya than the military ruler. So they will like some sort of democracy to come back. Whether Aung San Suu Kyi will able to come or not come, the time will tell. But considering her popularity, she will again come back. India is very correctly brought out. We are now very mature democracy. We are possibly doing many things as a track diplomacy. Rather than doing everything openly. We are not criticizing the Myanmar military ruler. At the same time, we are trying to make sure that the democracies come back. So I think our response has been very, very, one can say, measured and sort of matured. Rather than going all out, we will not achieve anything. So India will take a very balanced decision, balanced attitude, wherein both are important to us, whether it is a military ruler or Aung San Suu Kyi coming back, so that our relationship grow from here, because military to military relations are very important for India and Myanmar, because our future is interwoven together.
Okay, all right. Mr. Sinha?
Very quickly, I think India has to play an important role. Yes, Manju is right, Chinese have the most cards in their hand, but the amount of goodwill that now we enjoy in Burma, Myanmar, especially with the Burmese army actually. In fact, it was the army which was pushing back against China, and therefore China opened up new and new lines to Aung San Suu Kyi. The army does realize that China's involvement with the armed groups. Myanmar has 21 armed groups, 21 of them, especially the ones in the north, United Wa and all that, are very closely linked with the Chinese. And they've been feeling uncomfortable about this, and they've been trying to push them back, not successful about it. We have goodwill with the Tatmadaw. We should work with them quietly. We do not want to cause international chaos or cause trouble to the people if there are hard sanctions, food and food security, etc. But we definitely need to pull our weight along with Japan, possibly Indonesia, to help bring about a settlement, because we need a stable Myanmar on our eastern borders. It is in our national interest, and naturally, economically and security-wise, it makes a lot of sense for us to be a little more active, even though quietly.
Absolutely. And Ambassador, close the show for us with your concluding remarks.
Frank, thank you. Look, I have absolutely no doubt in my mind that a stable Myanmar is in our interest, especially for the most important aspect, which is our security situation along the border, including the fact of people not just coming across to do their daily chores, but coming across in hordes as refugees. There is absolutely no doubt in my mind. I also fully understand that we do have good working relations with the Myanmarese army. And to the extent that we are in a position to exercise a certain amount of moderation in their behavioral patterns, it is important. I want to just make one point which I think is very important. Look, in this game, one of the things that could happen in Myanmar is this China versus the West, a kind of schism in various senses. We must ensure that we remain India and no one sees us as anything else other than that. And so, therefore, Shakti, I think this business of Japan and the other countries that you started mentioning, to my mind, we may have policies similar to theirs, but we should do it ourselves. We have goodwill. We have our own sets of position. And I think all that is important. You certainly should have conversations. You should talk to people. But most important, you should be completely cognizant of where your interest lies, which lies really in the border being reasonably safe, secure from our perspective. No movements unnecessary or too many movements, and especially in keeping militancy under control. That is important. The rest is to encourage them to try and have internal dialogues and try and find situations. Thank you.
All right, gentlemen, we'll have to leave it at that. Thank you so much for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. What's coming out of this discussion is that the situation in Myanmar is fluid and the military junta probably did not expect this kind of a backlash from the people. India's stand is very clear. We are with the people of Myanmar and we will have a practical deal with whoever is in control. Myanmar importance to us, and we have to carry out a perfect balancing act between the military regime and the democratically elected government. We have to work quietly, pull our weight where we can, and ensure that we work in our own interest and not get caught up in the games of the other players like China and the West. A stable Myanmar is in our and the people of Myanmar's best interest. That's it from me. See you again next time. But before I leave, let me thank you once again for being here. Remember to like and subscribe to Bharata First on YouTube and also follow the social media handles. I need your support now more so than ever. Please spread the word.